Alright, so now let's look at some actual data of a session that I've run. And what we want to do is we'll look at the data as it is. Remember, everything is within 5-minute segments. So, here's basically one section, approximately. Stop. And then here would be a rest period. Somewhere around in there is a rest period. And so then another section along there. And then the final section, the final training section is about here. And then the rest period. So that's kind of the layout that we can see of how that the session has been divided. And of course we can look at the time down here to know what we're talking about. So you could see that the range that we have been interested in, according to our training section, is the 60 range right here. So everything above this area, above 60, is what we're interested in. So when you divide that off into the rest period, you can see, for instance, here during a rest period, there's still some high activity during that rest period. And we'll compare that to the actual EEG data to see what's going on there. But generally, it's pretty high levels during the section. You're getting pretty decent levels. So this was a successful type session. And let's just look quickly at some of the differences that I can notice by looking at this data. So, and as an example point here, you could see that I dropped into the baseline range. Once again, the baseline is around here. That's our baseline, thereabouts. It's from 60 down. So from 60 here to 40 is our baseline range. All right, so that's what we're interested in for the tone is being triggered during this time, okay? Because we are below 60. 60 is where the tone is triggered. So here the tone would be triggered, and here it's getting increasingly loud as it's going down. Here it would be very loud, but this is during a rest period, so we don't hear it. But anytime during the training periods when the tone drops below 60, or when the eSense value of attention drops below 60, we're going to hear that tone. So you can see that throughout the session, these are the rest periods. And you could see that during the, for instance, let's just look at the first training period here. I triggered the tone only a couple times. One time had to bring it back into range. Now we're still within our baseline period, the neutral zone, so our attention is still active, but it's just not elevated as it is here. So I never do reach a really very high period during that. Surprisingly, I do as soon as I go into a rest period, just right after, which is interesting. but we are getting new stimulus with the beach sounds and such. But as I go into, let me go ahead and get rid of and let's focus back on our range of what we're interested in. Yeah, there. So in our range here, this is without any tone. Now, of course, during the rest periods, you wouldn't have heard the tone anyway, but you could see that attention is still active during the rest periods, and there's nothing wrong with that. We just don't happen to be training for it at that time. But during the rest periods, I do take some needed brain rest. And so I can drop down low into the values and not have to worry about the tone being triggered, because it's not. So here would be an example of a baseline moving from a rest period starting at 15 going to 20, then coming back up. So I start without a tone, then I do drop down into a tone for just a second, but then I move it back up and keep it high through most of the period. Now I want you to also notice a tapering off period. I've seen in this session and in several other sessions I've done, to be able to maintain a good solid attention for around 4 minutes or so, 4.5 minutes, and then I kind of start to drift off. I don't know if I'm anticipating the rest period or if that's a current limitation, of my attention span, what have you. But I do notice that pattern here. You can see it. So you could also see that coming out of a rest period, I'm at a low area, but I pull it up. I pull that attention value back up. And then I hold it again up to about that 4.5 minute point. And then it starts to taper off and I lose it a bit, still within the baseline range. In each case, still within the baseline range. However, the tone's being triggered. But then I get some needed rest from the period, and you can see that I pop right back up during the beginning of the rest period. So it's like the beach sound gets your attention again for a second. So these are static, although they're random numbers. The stimulation's basically the same. And then the beach sound is a different variety and variation. In this third period or second rest period, I definitely took advantage of it and relaxed. But as it started to end, I pulled it back up with just one drop down here, then held it. In this case, not as long. Not as long. I held it about 3 minutes. Then definite dropout and drop below baseline. That's my really first drop below baseline. Well, here too, just for a tiny fraction of a second. But this is a drop below baseline, definite drop below baseline. So you do fatigue a bit. That's good though. You probably want to stretch these out and expand them. And then in the final training period, I do pull it back up, maintain it mostly throughout with a little tone dropout. Then the final relaxation period, let it go mostly. Again, you see a nice drop here during that last rest period. All right, so that's the attention values and how to see them on the graph and what we end up with there. So it's good data. to get. And this was a good session. And let's compare now. Let's look at the EEG readings.